So I have with me here Kyle Bruckmann, composer, performer, oboist, um, joining us at UNM soon for the 2023 John Donald Robb Composer Symposium with the group Splinter Reeds. We're really excited to have you guys coming here. It's been great preparing, and so yeah, we're all just really excited for next month.
Thanks.
All right, so I thank you for coming with us. I wonder if you could just give us a more in-depth idea of your musical life, the kind of stuff that's been keeping you busy.
Well, Splinter Reeds in general, I hesitate to speak for everybody, but one of the delights and challenges of this group is that between the five of us, we live in four different cities, all spread across the country. This is our 10th anniversary. This year is actually we've been
That's right.
10 years now. So we are always incredibly grateful for when we do get to work together. We have definitely found our rhythm with working remotely, planning long-term, planning 2-3 projects ahead and making sure we pre-practice and everything. So that, that's a huge part of what we do. Individually, 4 out of the 5 of us have pretty heavy-duty full-time teaching gigs at this point in our life. So while we would love to play more with Splinter, we're kind of in a good zone right now of like 4 to 6 projects per year is about all we can handle and get away from our teaching gigs to do anyway. So I'm teaching full time at the University of the Pacific in Stockton, which I adore because they let me do a lot of things far beyond oboe lessons.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I teach some composition courses. They have a vintage Buchla 200 there, so I teach an analog synthesis class, some arts entrepreneurship focused things, arts administration. It's good.
That's awesome.
Good.
That sounds like sounds like a very large array of things. In addition to your teaching gigs, could you give me an idea of the different ensembles? Maybe just in addition to Splinter Reeds, not only that you perform in, but also the ones that you lead and have founded.
Oh yeah, I'm pretty lucky at this point in my life that I have gotten to where the majority of my playing is new music and or chamber music, which is really how I like it, honestly. Nothing against the orchestra, but it's not my first choice of happy places. I do have a contract with the Stockton Symphony, which is one of the many regional orchestras in the Bay Area. I enjoy playing with them, love the folks in it. I sub a lot with a lot of the other regional orchestras, but really the most common activities these days are bouncing around between there's San Francisco Contemporary Music Players, of which I'm technically a member, Echo Ensemble, which is the house band at UC Berkeley, basically working primarily with student and faculty composers. We just did the U.S. premiere of a Hosokawa piece that has somehow never been performed in the U.S., despite being 30 years old now. Empyrean Ensemble, which is the house band new music ensemble at UC Davis.
Gotcha.
And Earplay is it's wonderfully ridiculous because it's basically the same 20 players who all kind of reshuffle into configurations, right, with the different groups. Later this evening, I'm going to go work with SF Sound, which is kind of the punk band version of the new music ensemble in the Bay Area that I first started working with when I got here. Really love those folks. Matt Ingalls, an Albuquerque native, as a matter of fact, was one of the founders and somebody I met just before I moved out to the Bay Area. And we'll be doing some free improvisations. What am I missing? Honestly, a lot of the other groups I've led and that I've composed for, I wish I could say that they were more current going concerns. There's a group Rack that I founded in Chicago that I haven't gotten to play with for several years now. But the drummer and I still do some stuff. We actually just released an album together last week.
Really? Oh, that's exciting. I'll check that out.
Yeah, it's a quartet with Lisa Metzacap on bass and Philip Greenleaf on saxophone.
Right. Very cool. Cool. So, shifting focus a little bit now to the little gray area between being a composer and a performer.
Yeah.
Now, first off, I'm interested in the way that you describe your compositional process and the focus in the foregrounding of the collaborative process with the performers, especially the way you describe it as kind of creating like a framework for the musical qualities of your colleagues. I wonder if you could, yeah, just explain that or maybe describe that a little bit, how that process goes for you.
Yeah. Thanks for asking that. This is something I feel very strongly about. I believe me, I am grateful that there are as many approaches to music making in the world as they are, and I'm very greedy, and I like to try to get my greedy little fingers into as many of them as I can. The music that I make myself is completely driven by the fact that I came to capital C composition a little bit backwards, a little bit.
Right.
I spent most of my adolescence kind of living this dual existence of strapping on a bow tie and playing in youth orchestras and practicing Mozart, and also being in experimental punk bands and gradually discovering the world of noise and free jazz and creative music. And the AACM is honestly, if I could cite one thing as having the biggest impact on my worldview within music, that it would be the Association for the Advancement of Creative Musicians. And that kind of conflation of ideas, I love performing and tackling hyper-specific, through composed, fully notated music. But because I was an improviser before I recognized, honestly, I did a lot more improvising before I played much contemporary classical music. And that was just an accident of what my teachers let me do when, and what I did on, and what I had access to do anyway on the side, right? So it's like I kind of jettisoned out of grad school and went straight into the bookstores and basements and warehouses of Chicago in the mid-90s. So when I compose, I feel I start with that idea that I'm adding value to what I could probably improvise nicely anyway with friends that I have chosen because of their unique and idiosyncratic voices. So it's very much less about orchestration than it is about hosting a dinner party, you know?
Yeah, totally.
Right? It's like we're orchestrating for specific humans because this will probably be interesting when I get them together.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's so interesting. I think and just in the world of contemporary new music, that seems to be more and more the focus is writing for not instruments, not ensembles, but writing for people.
I mean, my friend and colleague Ken Ueno has gotten a lot of mileage out of calling it person-specific composition, right? And that's real. And yeah, so what did Duke Ellington do a long time ago, right? Like this has always been something that's been central to African-American musical approaches. So I try to do honor to those as best I can. And it's nice to see the new music world finally starting to catch up.
Yeah, right. Totally. Yeah. And it is because of the efforts of performers within the community. So
yeah, I think so.
All right, wonderful. My next question was going to be if you felt like there was much of a fundamental difference between the compositional process between writing for other performers and yourself, but it sounds like there's not really, because it sounds like if it's just kind of, I don't know, just it sounds like the compositional process is more of just structuring a vibe sort of between the people that you can interact well with, and I assume one of those people is yourself.
Typically, yeah. And that, I mean, honestly, that's just where I am personally. I have yet to I'm not going to hold my breath and expect to be commissioned by a group I don't know, right? That's not really my focus, right? And I don't identify first and foremost as that sort of composer.
Sure.
Honestly, the only thing I've ever composed that I wasn't playing within was for Dana Justin, the bassoonist and founder of Splinter Reeds, and I cheated because the piece was built largely upon pre-recorded bass oboe improvisations that I recorded and manipulated and then transcribed.
Got it.
So
right. Transcribed into Dana's sort of unique language, but as well, of course, for bassoon.
Yep.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, now I hope it would be okay if I could ask some questions about your experience with Splinter Reeds specifically. I'm especially interested in your perspective of the unique, sound profile, timbre profile, whatever you would like to call it, the sound of the reed quintet, in contrast to other things that people who are more familiar with traditional classical music might associate with these instruments, like for a lot of them, for instance, the wind quintet, or maybe some more jazz ensembles for things like the saxophone. So I wonder what that contrast feels like from your perspective as the performer.
I also play in a regular woodwind quintet called Quinteto Latino. We play exclusively Latinx composers. Which is actually how I first met Professor Hurtado. Yeah, we go way back in that regard. He composed a couple of our first biggest hits.
Really?
And I love that group. I love the mission. I love the things we get to do in the spaces we get to get into. And I love the people. But honestly, like, the sound of the woodwind quintet is kind of a bastard shotgun marriage, it's like it doesn't blend well, it doesn't make that much sense. And I think the greatest pieces in the repertoire written for it try to maximize the like Ligeti pieces are really, I think, some of the best that's out there for woodwind quintet, because he runs with that. He's like, these instruments don't belong together, so let's lean into that. So the reed quintet was, when I first discovered it, and I was late to the game, it was really, when Dana invited me to join the group, that I started looking into Califax, and it was really this kind of facepalm. It's like, of course, no offense to my flute and French horn friends, but when you replace that, suddenly we get a little bit more of the string quartet juju.
That's exactly how I feel about it.
Yeah, like what it's like my fellow wind players, like we're always jealous. It's like, especially if you're a new music dork, right? Like, you get hooked on the Bartok string quartets, and you're like, how come I can't do that? Why can't I can't?
Where's ours? Yeah,
exactly. Like, how do we dig in? How do we get these nasty, toothy, physical gestures in the sounds? And well, guess what? With the reed quintet, it's front and center.
Yeah, definitely.
And we're able to kind of go between the magic of a blended like instrumental color, that we can get this organ-like sonority. We can kind of crawl into each other's sounds a lot more, and we get a little bit of the band thing too. We can play 8 times as loud as the quartet.
Yeah.
Right. And just the 5 of us as individuals, we're all relatively sensation seeking. We're extremists. We have a good time. We gravitate towards music that has a physicality and a materiality to it. Right.
Yeah, definitely.
We explore a lot of different styles, but we've kind of thought about that. It's like, what's the commonality? What's the common thread? And there's usually something that's about every piece that we gravitate towards. There's something about it that's a little much, right? A little bit over the top in whatever parameter that may be. And we're drawn to that.
I think there's something about that is so encapsulated by just the name of the ensemble, Splinter Reeds. It just gives you the idea that you're just going so ham that you're breaking something. You're splintering. I love it. It's such a great energy for the ensemble, and you can definitely hear the things you're describing, that kind of over the top, like pushing the boundaries in something in like every recording. I definitely feel that.
I'm glad that comes. We came up with that name during our very first session. Like, we Yeah, we had a reading session meeting. Basically, it's like let's do our speed date thing and see if we want to make this an ensemble. We sat down and we read Ned McGowan's Woodburn, and at the end of it, we were all just like, our faces were just shredded, and we're like, Splinter Reeds, that's it, and we all laughed, and we're like, done. That's got it, So
I think it fits so well. All right, wonderful. So now hopefully I think it's perfect that I'm getting to do this on the, what is it? Oh man, I don't, the 10-year anniversary. I was trying to think of a fancy word for it, but I was like, I don't actually know. But on the 10-year anniversary of the ensemble, because it's such, I feel it, in terms of not only Splinter Reeds, but like the woodwind community, it's a pretty important ensemble. It's the West Coast's first reed quintet. And so I was hoping to get some perspective from you, maybe a little bit of retrospective on how you've seen the repertoire for the for that specific ensemble change throughout these 10 years, both as a consequence of Splinter Reed's efforts in commissioning, not only commissioning, but also working with up and coming composers like what we're doing at UNM. But also just in terms of new composers, just seeing it and thinking, wow, this would be a great ensemble to try and do something different with.
I mean, the origin myth of the reed quintet goes back to Califax from Netherlands, that just 30 plus years ago came up with the idea, and there's been a steady accrual of more and more groups who've gotten hooked on it. And in fact, sorry,
No, you're okay.
This book was published by Califax a couple of years ago on the occasion of their 30th anniversary. Is that visible?
Could you do it a little bit up? There we go. That's perfect. Califax and the Kaleidoscope. Oh, a little bit more, and then ooh, a little bit more. There we go. Wonderful. There we go. Thank you.
I learned a couple of years ago to press hide self-view for mental health while on Zoom. So forgive me.
That sounds so smart.
And if you want to read, you can read it in Dutch if you prefer to. It's two-sided. But yeah, it's this book that, has kind of gets into the history of the quintet as of a few years ago. And we're in here. Acropolis is in here. Paradise Winds is in here. Barcelona Reed Quintet, right? It's it's taken hold, and it's growing all the time, in part because it fulfills such a need scholastically too, right? Like we can go in and we can do residencies in Big Ten schools with humongous band programs, right? It's like they've got a great music department. The orchestra is one thing, but then they've got, what do they do with the saxophones? And they've got twice as many clarinets as they need, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
It's just such a perfect match for that overlap. And it's been wonderful to see so many different groups crop up and have distinct identities, right? I mean, like we started when we got together, we kind of made the decision from the beginning that like there are so many wonderful arrangements, right? Like Califax started with making a lot of arrangements.
Right.
They're impeccable showmen. They do a great job of kind of working the chamber music circuit and wooing skeptical audiences, right? Slightly more conservative, more traditional chamber music audiences.
Right.
And bless their hearts for doing so. We decided we didn't need to do that, right? It's like we're new music dorks. We're just going to play new music, focus on the new music that we find the most interesting in whatever format that comes. So yeah, I mean, we'll get cold calls from composers, and we'll say, "That's awesome. Thank you for thinking of us. Your piece looks really great. It's not really our aesthetic, but here are the emails of Paradise and Acropolis and like all these other folks who it might be a better fit for," right? So it's really, it's come to expand far beyond the novelty factor, and it's been really, really fun to watch.
Right. Totally. Yeah. It definitely seems like it's a like undergoing a process of flowering right now. And so it sounds like it probably is not very hard to find repertoire nowadays then. It sound like you've just have the luxury of being able, like, no, we don't actually need this piece, but and it's wonderful that there are those ensembles for those different composers. Do you think that there is any sort of lack anywhere in the community of not only the repertoire but the ensembles? Like maybe there aren't enough doing improvisation or with electronics or anything like that, or do you think it's pretty well covered?
That I'm not sure. I mean,
Yeah, totally.
And that's definitely what we've kind of chosen as our specialty.
Right.
And in part, it's funny because Dana and I first met through the improv community, through the free improv creative music circuit, right? And when the group founded, we agreed that we're not going to make this an improv group because we'll do that elsewhere. Let's just focus on this as the contemporary composition, right? But surprise, surprise, right? As we've gotten more comfortable and built rapport as a unit, and as the field has started to shift, at this point we're like, yeah, it's of course we're going to use this piece that has modular components, that has an open score, that has graphic spaces for soloing. It's like, yeah, we need to do that.
Right.
I don't know if how many other groups are doing so.
Right.
I hope more. I mean, I hope that classical music in general will get further from the score and more towards spaces where we respect a spectrum of, okay, the written score is a great technology, but it ain't the only one.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And the assumption that it is the best way to interact and to create things is a vestige of the mechanical age, right?
Right.
Nothing else in our lives is 100% beholden to the printing press and the Gutenberg Bible. So
totally.
We want to work more and more with composers who don't care whether or not they can quote unquote notate in traditional Western contexts. Very interesting to see where that goes. We're not doing as much of that now as we'd like, but that's kind of something that keeps coming up in our visioning.
Right. And that's always something that you guys are like excited to be doing. Yeah. Do you feel like you get a lot of chances to be able to work that into your into the scholastic part of the ensemble as well? Do you feel like you really get to work with young performers and like help them get into that world?
Yeah, it's happening more and more. I definitely feel like we're doing that individually more impactfully in our teaching work.
Right, exactly.
I mean, it's a huge part of what I'm, a shift that I'm personally trying to be on the team of facilitating at UOP. It's like I'm teaching a class on the AACM. I'm teaching an improv lab right now with 15 quote unquote classical musicians who've never tried to do it before. And
you're right.
Oh man, we're having fun.
Totally. Yeah. That's great to hear. I think it makes total sense that when I was looking at your website and I saw the Dr. Hurtado's name mentioned, I was like, that's exciting. And now that hearing the things that you're passionate about, it makes total sense. And I think that all of this is things that we love to foster at UNM. And so that's one of the reasons why it's just been such an exciting project, getting ready for the ensemble to come and getting to compose for you guys. It's been a real blast. Yeah.
Well, we cannot wait to actually making things come together in person, because that's always the key, right? That's
right.
Always, every time if there's something in the score, we're like, what is this student after exactly? I'm not sure I believe it. And as soon as we're hanging out, it all makes sense. So.
Yeah. Totally. That's what it's all about. All right. Wonderful. Thank you. I mean, it's a little bit early, but I think that was wonderful. Thank you thanks for talking with me. Thank you for answering my questions so wonderfully. I really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you, Chris. We can't wait to be there.
Thank you.